Okay. Call the meeting to order. If everybody would please rise for the pledge. Pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
So before we launch into the item 3, I'm going to exercise the mayor's prerogative to digress and note that it's Larry Schopfer's last meeting. We told you no parties, but we did not tell you that we would continuously acknowledge you. So I do want to personally thank you for all of your years of service. I think it's the briefest thing I could say, and the most accurate is I wouldn't have come back as mayor if you weren't still the village administrator. So that says something about you that, you know.
Say that I'm leaving when you're mayor. So
Yeah, that's yeah. Well, it says that your loyalty is not quite the same, but that's all right. Anyway, thank you for everything you have done. It's much appreciated. I don't know if anybody else wants to say anything, but they're certainly welcome.
Yeah, we want to embarrass you. No.
Yeah.
It's okay.
No, I want to say that honestly, like the last 4 years, you know, obviously your contribution to this village is very big. I think you've established some great relationships and you've done a lot for this village. Or Charles, I know you keep being told that you have big shoes to fill, but you know, we've been really lucky and enjoy your retirement. And you know, if you ever want to just come hang at a meeting, you're totally welcome.
We should in fact reserve a seat and just put it. I told you today at your party how I feel and everything, but I know you get embarrassed. I just want to say that you have left a mark on this village. You can leave, but your effects linger.
That is true.
So you can go in peace, even though we don't want you to go, but you can go in peace knowing what you've left behind. So thank you so much for everything.
Can I say something?
Yeah,
John?
please, anybody.
Yeah, Jenna and Larry, I've worked with you 17 years. During that time, I've come to admire you more and more, just as a person and as a manager. I think if someone were to create a model of a perfect manager, it'd be based on you. You're beyond capable and knowledgeable. You write and speak clearly and effectively. You handle conflict without fueling the fire. You're even-tempered, respectful to everybody, no matter how difficult the other person might be. You're kind, you're funny. My 17 years with you, I don't think we ever had a disagreement, even a tense moment, And it's you who get credit for that. And I just want to wish you and your family a happy retirement.
Thank you so much. I'm not going to say much other than it's been a pleasure and a privilege to work here. And you know, I wouldn't change what I did for anything. Great decision that I made coming here and staying here and retiring from here. So thank you all.
Thank you, Larry.
Thank you, Larry.
Appreciate it. Okay. Land use approval streamlining. I guess, gentlemen, you want to come up and you'll tell us how you want to present this. While you're settling in, I want to say one thing about the October 20 meeting. You got plenty of time today. The October 20 meeting has a pretty full agenda. So when you are recapping, I would do the executive summary version of that meeting because we're doing it for the purpose of allowing the public to comment on it, which they can't do. I don't think you disagree with anything I just said, but I just wanted to remind you because Charles put the agenda in front of me today and it's long. Thank you. So, all yours.
So I guess I'll start. I'm Randy Huff, the co-chair of the Streamlining Committee and chair of the ARB. So I'm going to go through a quick overview of the entire thing, and then David will go over the survey, and then we'll dive right into the 13 strategies that we've recommended, the committee's recommended. So our committee was charged with developing proposals to streamline, simplify, and improve the approval process for land use projects. We hired PACE PACE law, land use lawyers to guide us through this. They've done this many times. What you see in front of you is the result of that and pretty much caps off what this committee was charged. So, let's see. So what we have here, yeah, like I said, afterwards, David will go through the, after I do the summary, David will go through the survey report and conclusions. The streamline report is divided into 4 sections. Project background, just what it is. The number 2, we spent a long time documenting and drawing out the current development process, which was a good exercise that could be used for possibly onboarding new members of boards and things like that. Section 3 is where we sat in a roundtable and we kind of drew out what the problems and issues were with each of the boards and what we saw in the building department, the code issues, that sort of thing, and prioritize those. And section 4 is the answers to how to solve those issues or how to get started solving and implementing answers to those issues. So that's a quick overview. The one thing I wanted to mention was that there's a lot of stuff in here, and what got lost a little bit is kind of the big significant structural changes that are going to happen if we implement all this. And so I highlighted 4 things. The biggest one is shifting residential applications away from the planning board's site review. That's a huge change. The biggest benefit for streamlining, and it's new for Irvington. If we do it, it is kind of a standard best practice in many jurisdictions and several of the villages around here. So hand in hand with that, you remove these residential applications from the planning board, the technical site plan review would be just with the building departments and the consultants. So this is already being done, but the step that we're taking out is the kind of the public logging of residents during the reviewing drawings and things like that, and what they missed. And so the other part of moving these applications out of planning would be the design review tasks, and those would be shifted to the ARB. There's quite a bit there that's not being done by the ARB, so the ARB would have to change quite a bit to be able to handle things like view preservation, placement, massing. There's a lot of what we would consider design review going on at the planning board. And then kind of a giant one is a comprehensive update of the village code. So in addition to the 13 strategies would require a lot of code updates, we also have another 12 or 13 items that we identified that are just hanging out there, like, actually I don't have that list in front of me, but we identified like the pre-existing non-conforming business district site capacity. There's a lot of things. Each one of them probably is a lot of work, but we put them into that bucket. So doing this code update would be a lot of work. I think we were talking about getting a third-party law firm that specializes in that to do that. So that's the overview of the whole report. And then I'll turn it over to David for the survey. Go from there.
Okay, David Zweibel. I am co-chair with Randy. I am not on any of the land use boards and never have been. I have been before them all as a citizen and applicant of many different building projects, both commercial and residential in this town and in many other communities. In any case, that's who I am. So I draw your attention to the 6th page permitting survey piece. And it you as the board decided when we started this project that to make it meaningful, we needed a more accurate understanding of what citizens felt in the community. We had a lot of rumors, a lot of letters to the editor complaining about this and that. I mean, letters to the board complaining about this and that. Well, we needed to formalize that and really get into the pieces of it. So we did survey. From that to the initial part of the survey was to send it out to anyone who has applied for a building permit, both the owner of the property, the architect, and or contractor, as we could. And we did that with people over the last 2 years. We would have preferred to go further back, but our systems aren't up to date enough. Or we changed systems, thank God. Has this new system. So the information was available there. It went out. It also went out in general to the community for other people. We got a lot of responses, and they are graphed by issue. As you go through the report, we could spend the whole meeting on what these individual findings are, but they really are nothing surprising. Basically, I mean, you could just quickly look at these graphs, and there's a lot of half of it is one, and the other half of the graph is the other feeling. Meaning one half representing people who are complaining or not pleased, and the other half with people who are pleased or very pleased. So I will take you to the very last page and some of the conclusions for that. So the idea was that this is important to all of our applicants, how they feel about this process. Surveys by nature are not, 100% accurate. It's a survey. But what is apparent is that the general finding is that both the structure of the village's permitting process and the manner in which they are currently implemented would benefit from revision to optimally serve all constituents, including the applicants and the community at large. So that's saying what we're trying to do is what we need to do. And that this validates the work of the PACE and Streamline Committee report. Highlights included in that is there is a feeling of lack of transparency, lack of predictability, indifference of staff, significant cost, and procedural delays. Now, those are all subjective. And, they're not documented incidences, but if enough people are feeling like that, we need to pay attention to them. It's the world of customer service nowadays. You can't make a phone call anywhere without getting this call is being recorded. Please answer the following questions after the call. So that's what we're doing. We have recorded the calls and we are answering the questions, or getting the questions answered, and this is what they said. So in order for trust in good government, we need to do something. So that's that report. Are there any questions that you have about this? It's self-stating. So now we move on to the whole PACE report. And you have an index page if you want to. And Randy is going to start with the first 3 sections and sort of go through them, not in detail. And then once we get to section 4, which is the critical implementation plan and strategies, then we will take each of the 13 points and go through them one at a time.
Yeah, actually, I covered most of that. I don't want to spend too much time on these sections. Section 3, of course, you could read at your leisure, and that really kind of details just problems and issues that were identified in the meeting. So that section's interesting. But I think we'll just jump right into the 113 priority strategies and just launch off at number 1, which I think you're going to do that.
Right, okay, if we go to number one, I think that word, if you want it there, or you have a copy of that. Notes on that. If you notice, there's 4 columns. Strategy, who, time frame, resources, and notes. And that's where all of this is. So the reason there are 13 pieces is that each of them, there may be some similarities between them, but the who, that's the people who will be designated as those who will take charge of that particular piece, bring it to a solid set of recommendations, bring it back to the board for final approval. The who changes. There are many people who are repeated in the who. Charles, Marianne, her titles go in there a lot. A village trustee goes in there a lot, but it's not this 30-person committee. It will be, when we're talking about planning board, the other person will be a planning board member. Talk about ARB, the other person will be an ARB member, etc. So that's the reason why there are 13 buckets. The resource column, we're not going to talk about that much, but it does exist. And that's the appendix. It's like 10 pages with infinite links in it. So that when these each individual items are addressed, they already have a set of resources set out where they can compare it to what Scarsdale is doing, what a best practice has been elsewhere in New York State. And I will say that working with Pace University Land Use Law Center was just a wonderful experience. They are the lead people in New York State to look at streamlining building codes. And they've done it in many places before. They've created templates, and so therefore they have all this resource information that they have entered into that. And then there's time frame. And Pace was actually the people who put those numbers in there because that's from experience. If you're going to do this kind of review, this is a good time frame to have that happen in. Let's just dig into the first one, which is, one thing before I do that. If you could note that on your index, items 1 and 2, items 6 and 7, and items 12 and 13. Those 6 items are items that we have considered as being no cost to implement, generally agreed upon by the full committee, highly recommended by Pace as best practice, and relatively easy to implement. Not that work doesn't have to be done.
When we talked previously, hold on.
It was 5.
Yeah, you didn't have item 2.
I didn't have item 2, and I added that as a little bit. After looking at all the 5, there was a sense that maybe it's too low hanging fruit, and we want to indicate to the community we're really doing something. And that's the one item that doesn't have a big cost, has some work to do, but if we can start that work now, that will make a significant change. Now, any of these items are going to require, if you as a board choose to approve them as going forward, the first 6 or the remaining whatever, and you could choose just 4 of the 6 or you could choose 7. Any of them, once they're started, no action is going to be taken until they present back to the board of here are the details. So it's not like you are changing the code.
The only thing I want to point out, David, is that, and you'll find this out when you're on this side of the table, this won't be the only thing that the village staff is going to be working on, or that the board is going to be working on. You have facilities planning, you have a new village administrator who I think is going to be great, but he's still, you know, learning the ropes. I'm not making a statement about whether we do or not do the items you said do up front,
Right.
but you're gonna have to be realistic about the village resources, because that same building department that seems to get named in a number of these things is the one that people are dissatisfied, you're telling me, are dissatisfied with, because I wasn't personally, but that doesn't mean other people weren't happy with them. I got it. So the question's gonna be in, how do we implement it from a practical perspective? But that's not gonna happen tonight. I just wanted to make that up.
The only, the clarifying answer to that is the timeframe.
Right,
Um,
that's
most-
right. That's
Most
fair.
of these are indicated as a 6-month time frame, but there are some that are 9 months and some are 18 months.
Can I say, want to make also sort of one clarifying comment? I do think we have to be careful with like thinking about the dissatisfaction with the building department, because I think people are dissatisfied with a lot of different things that may present themselves as frustration
Mhm.
with the building department, but as we discussed in these committee meetings, right? A lot of that is frustrated with the code,
Right,
right?
that's right.
Frustrated with the process. So I think,
Oftentimes
yeah.
they and the boards are the messengers.
correct. So I think, you
Of
know,
our
that's what we're
mistakes.
trying, yeah. So I think that's what this process is trying to get at, right? Like, let's get at the root cause of the problems and then, you know, not so much like blaming, but, you know, because I think it is tough and it's like a little bit unfair that the focus just be on that, but that we're trying to fix the, you know, the process, the code issues, and hopefully get to that.
I agree that one of our most major problems is the code itself. And it's complex, it's confusing. But nonetheless, there's a process which is also complicated. It's complicated because the code is there, but then people are bounced back and forth between boards and.
And the education problem, right? Like
And-
that whether people have enough information. So that process of trying to get that information out might be something that, you know, could cause a lot of that frustration for homeowners.
Yeah, if they knew at the beginning that, you know, I'm sorry, this is a very complex project and there's a lot of rules and it's gonna take some time, and it's gonna cost you between Y and Z, then they would be less frustrated. So that's one of our. But yes, I agree, we don't wanna shoot the messenger here, because a lot of it is based on that. But there are other reforms that we can make to make things user-friendly, you know? Whatever, hand out cookies at the front door of the building barn. Anyway, actually, people do that, you know. Coffee and cookies is a thing in a lot of places nowadays. You know, I go to get my car repaired and God, there's breakfast sitting there for me. Okay, so item number 1, and we'll try to chunk through these things, because, you know, there's 15 items. Don't want to take all night. So basically, this is annually evaluate the process. So this is a classic sort of easy to do. Next evaluation, if we're doing this annually, would not be until next year. The committee of the WHO here is going to look at what their process is going to be to evaluate it, which could involve another survey or not, or whatever. And that's not the hardest thing to implement. But once again, it won't be implemented until a year from now. But nonetheless, we're taking action to see that we're ready. So when that time comes, we will implement it. So that's item 1. Item 2, if you have any questions on item 2 is probably the more complex, and that's the most recently added, but would have the most use, so to speak, in terms of affecting people. And that's limit the scope of the site development plan review. It is a little complex because it involves, as Randy spoke of already, changes to the procedures at the both the planning board and the ARB. The concept here is simply that, as many other communities do, is we're removing the site plan review from single-family and two-family homes that are having a renovation that's under a certain percentage. What we're written down here is 50%, 40%, 60%, whatever. And that this renovation is consistent with their current capabilities for mass coverage, zoning, etc. So if you have a lot that has open space in it and you're a single family or a two family, then you don't have to go to the planning board. You go to the building department. The building department does the review to determine, in fact, your coverage is correct, etc. And then it gets over to the ARB to review for, what this thing looks like, and they are going to have to look at a few other issues, confirming that the report from the engineer, etc., is correct, the landscape architect, etc. And this will accomplish significant streamlining for most home renovations that will fall under this. That will also relieve the burden of the planning board, who has these 5-hour meetings, so that their focus is mainly on projects that are more than 50% and are brand new projects and the big projects. And that's where all the time is for them. And it's like getting these little guys out of the meat grinder would be a significant improvement for a lot of people. And sadly enough, a lot of these complaints, if you dig into the survey, are people who are just doing a kitchen renovation, or putting on an air conditioner. In fact, I want to comment, I did get a personal letter from someone who just installed a HVAC unit, and they said their previous experience with the building department was negative, but this, because of the improvements that have already been made, she said it was like a whiz. It just went 1, 2, 3. So things can be done to change things, and we're already doing it. And that was one comment from the other person. I've got another comment that will be exact opposite direction, although a lot of them are from past experiences.
So this would mean the building department. So what happens if they're not in compliance with, let's say, zoning or area standards? They get sent to ZBA?
No, it gets sent back to the planning board.
Okay.
And that's the decision that the building department make if they are looking at this application and they would see that there's problems here. Then that would go into this proposed concept of a pre-planning board meeting where that would be discussed with the planning board, the engineer, and appropriate parties to then get them ready to go to a planning board meeting and see whether they want to do it. Maybe it's like, oh, all of a sudden they discover they're way over their lot coverage, and sorry, we can't put in a swimming pool here unless you tear up all of your decks. So that, but rather than find that out in a planning board meeting, it would be nice if they knew it beforehand and their architect was able to make appropriate adjustments.
David, I'm a little confused. So you're saying that if an application, single-family house under 50% comes to the building department, but it doesn't meet the setbacks or it exceeds coverage,
If it exceeds coverage,
then it goes to the
planning board.
planning. What? It's not in here, is it?
There's like a lot of
I
details.
assume your other members.
Oh, no, this is the first I heard that. I don't,
Right.
to me, I mean, since
It wouldn't go to planning board, go to
Well, if it's an issue about zoning, it would go to
Yeah, that's
ZBA.
what coverage is.
Yeah, okay. So it would either go to zoning or it
Okay.
would go to planning.
Okay.
I think,
And-
I think
Does that
if
mean
it doesn't
that-
meet the criteria, then it would be a planning board issue. If it's a zoning problem, then it goes.
But that means the
Yes.
building department will make that determination where to send them.
Yes.
Well, what criteria would there be besides the bulk requirement?
Right.
Like,
I don't think there's a path to planning.
yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
the-
this is
Okay,
first
so
time
let's say it's
I
Yeah, I
know
don't
after the
think
zoning
it's-
board.
Because the other thing I had that I think is confusing here is you have options for exemption include all single-family dwelling reconstruction. Then it says reconstruction alteration of a single-family dwelling that's not increased by more than 50%. Those two are different. Are you recommending one over the other?
These are options that came up.
Okay.
We're
but-
not recommending that. We're recommending this goes to like some subcommittee that can make informed decisions on how
But
to
that's
proceed.
not what David just said.
I think it was a good
Yeah.
example.
Exactly. That's what would happen is if the DOT decides that this is a first place issue, then a subcommittee with these people that are listed in the scope or under the column of who, and the appropriate representatives from each of those.
Okay,
areas.
so you haven't made a recommendation. You're asking. the
We
Board of
have, in that
Trustees to look
particular
at it.
one, there's two choices, and those people need to go and do just a tad more research.
Or more accurately, you're asking the board to say, we want this group of experts to sit down and see what they think the best path is.
And come back, and present that,
Okay.
okay?
So we're kind of just presenting the big idea of like what's done in Hastings or Briarcliff Manor. As a template.
Yeah.
But the implementation is certainly going to be complicated.
Okay, so that's item 2. Any other questions on that one? I know that's probably the most complex one.
Right, just raise your hand or, okay. Sorry, you also have 2 planning meetings. I have enough trouble chasing people down. I don't know, how easy feels about that, 2 a month.
That was one suggestion.
Yeah, I'm not saying that's a
And-
bad suggestion. It's a function for the mayor and the board of. First, let me take a step back and say thank you to everybody on the committee. I know this was an enormous amount of work, and the reason I'm saying that is you're the faces that show up every time something's going on, or the village needs help. It's hard to get other people, and if you're gonna have the planning board meet 2 times a month, you're gonna need a lot more alternates.
Well, maybe that's the case, and that doesn't work. However, this idea of removing some burden of the planning board,
May help.
maybe
Yeah,
we don't need the
I
2
got
times
it.
a month
Okay.
situation. And that, any of these things can change while it's going on. None of this is written in stone.
I think one of the ideas about that too was you wouldn't always need 2 meetings. If you have a big project like Maxon,
Right.
that is going to take up a lot. But if you have a smaller project, smaller development project where somebody's building 2 houses, or whatever, that they might have a separate meeting because it would be less complicated. When you're going to a planning board meeting and you get stuck behind a super controversial project, it can be tough.
Oh my God.
So I think that was the idea to consider.
And by the way, because you were all members of the committee, if you got something, I'm fine to, if you guys are okay, I'm okay listening.
Okay, for the record, that's Doug
Oh,
McClure.
Douglas,
Doug McClure, yeah.
He's a local architect. He was on the committee. He's not on one of the boards, but he was a strong contributor, primarily because he's been through the process. Lots.
And our planning board chair wants to say something.
Cecil Manfredi, the chair. Adding another planning board meeting, not just 1 meeting, it's 2 meetings. Because there's a pre-meeting.
Yeah.
So that we crystallize what we're going to do at the meeting. And we're not ignorant of the fact that somebody with a new air conditioner gets stuck behind Maxon, and we generally put Maxon at the end, and we even had a separate meeting just for Maxon. We do recognize that as an issue.
And it almost sounds like you're already sort of doing it to some extent when you can.
Yeah, we can.
I'll make one
But
other
we don't
point.
always know that this is gonna take an hour and then somebody with 10 minutes is stuck behind.
One other point, and this may be a point to make when you're deciding, you know, which projects won't go before the planning board anymore, but I don't know if you guys thought about this. I did make this comment on the draft. Right now, and this is for applications that don't meet the bulk requirements, meaning coverage, setback, whatever. And when they come to the planning board will say, hey, listen, cut it down. You know, this is too big. We're not going to let you go to the zoning board. You know, it's too big. And I'd say 90% of the time they do. Now, so by the time it's come to the zoning board, it's maybe not as egregious. So if you don't go to the planning board, the zoning board is going to be seeing a lot more application. And the other thing that often happens is they say, come back and try it without any variance. And most of the time, they get it to a point where the planning board sends it to the zoning board and, you know, they don't have any issues. Once in a while, an applicant won't, like, and it happens maybe once a year, that the applicant won't cut it down. And so that the planning board will send it, say, we think it's too big. And I have no idea what the percentage of, you know, denials the zoning board gets in situations like that. But in any event, if it doesn't go to the planning board, and I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but be aware that the zoning board is going to have a much bigger job than they do right now, and different, really substantively different jobs. So you have to bear that in mind. I think it would be helpful to, you know, get their input on it.
Would that be mitigated by like going to the building department for consultation early on to sort of like,
I suppose.
sort of cut some of these things
I
down? so that
suppose
this-
the building department could say trim
In
it
some
down,
ways, I
but
think
that's a little bit different than the planning board saying.
Well,
Right,
I
right.
think that would be
That the
the
idea.
onus would then be on the building department to really meet with these guys and say, hey, you know, this isn't going to get you anywhere because your mass is like out of control. And we've never allowed you to, you know, encroach on your neighbor's property with your fence. Sorry.
But you don't have to wait for a monthly meeting then.
But you don't have to wait for a monthly meeting to
Right.
do that. And so
Just
hopefully.
just bear that in mind.
Yeah, no way.
I'm not speaking one way, I'm not for or against it, it's just something you gotta think about.
I agree with you that there are certain people that are like, we're doing this and, you know, we're gonna fight tooth and nail to go through.
No, the truth is most of the.
Most of the people don't, but there are a
Yeah,
few.
Most applicants are responsive.
And a little bit is how you communicate that with them. So that will be part of our revising what that initial process is. Okay, moving on.
Item 3. So one thing I want to say is, if you can see that there's different options on some of these. What we did was, we just discussed each section by itself. And now we're looking at like a complete solution. So some of these don't apply anymore, or some of these really need to be discussed. But what you're looking at is just what was documented when everybody was in the meeting and throwing out their ideas. So on streamlining the ARB, one of the options was the ARB provides an advisory opinion to the planning board for all projects subject to planning board review. So when that came up, we were really thinking about these small renovations that are in front of the planning and could use, you know, just a quick ARB once over because it's just a kitchen on the back of the house. But now we're talking about those aren't going to be in front of the planning board. What's left at the planning board is going to be the giant renovations, new construction, commercial, and right. So for me, as my personal opinion is that those items should go through a full ARB review. But this is what we came up with in committee. See, one of the options was also to have a paid architect on the planning board to just make the decisions right then and there. Similar to what the landscape architect and the engineer do for planning. For items that don't appear in front of the planning board, so these are ARB approvals. So one thing that ARB doesn't do right now is neighbor notification. So that's kind of a big part of the planning process. And that would have to be added to the ARB. I don't really know how that gets implemented. Right now, ARB is 99% of the applications are one visit. So when you add in the neighborhood notification, that might start pushing it to multiple visits. I'm not sure. Again, and then there's the technical expertise issue that's all throughout these ARB streamlining. And that has to do with using local architects that work here are not allowed to serve on the ARB due to conflict of interest issues. And, that just needs to be discussed some more. We believe that excluding them really hampers the ARB's potential resources, as you know, the most expert people in our village are those people who are serving on the ARB. So we have a threshold where bigger projects would go on to planning. They talked about also having lower threshold for projects that don't require ARB approval. I don't remember what the exact thing was, but it could be like a fence or something, where we could provide some sort of like visual design guide or some sort of information, and if that could be just done by the building inspector, unless somebody was pushing, you know, to have a pink plastic fence or something, then the building inspector would need to push it back to the ARB for some sort of advice. See, the demolition permits won't change for the historic districts. I'm not sure what that was about. I think what that had to do with is that if somebody's removing, the definition of demolition is strange in that it generates some visits to the ARB for just one window to be removed. So I think the whole demolition thing has to be revisited, at least the definition of demolition.
And the creation of a set of standards that if they fall within these standards, then the building department can make that conclusion. The question is if they don't.
So are you suggesting that there would be things in the historic district that would only go before the building inspector?
No.
Well, that's what David just said.
Oh, I'm not. So
Oh.
I'm only clarifying that the demolition definition, as the building inspector sees it, is generating some very strange things at the planning board, taking people that are just, you know, replacing one, doing kitchen again, one window, one door, something moves, and that generates a demolition visit to the ARB. So that's, you know, adding a month there, then they got to come back to the ARB a separate time for the design review. So it just becomes a lot. I think that could be cleaned up.
Can I ask a really basic question? Did you guys do you have suggestions for which things should go only to the ARB, or are you expecting the board of trustees to come up with that? Like which things go here, which things go there? I think it.
No, we don't, and we don't expect the board to. What we are asking for is that the board establish a subcommittee comprised of the who of that section, who would then be a small group of 4 to 6 people maximum, who would then go through it. They would come up with their suggestion, give it to
Okay.
you, and you guys either say, yeah, or, oh, God, we need to get this out to the public and let everybody know before we make a decision.
Oh, okay, I get it.
Okay.
Right, so item 4, we talked about a little bit, clarify, establish ARB standards. We have guidelines for the historic district that they do need some updating, but creating kind of a smaller set of guidelines for outside the historic district, we believe would really streamline some of the approvals. Just to give, I think the architects that work in the village know what we're looking for. All the other architects that come in, throw things at us, and then we've got to, without any kind of guidelines for them, they're not sure what to expect. So the guidelines are kind of a standard that we see in a lot of the villages, not just in historic districts. And one more thing about the guidelines. So in context of moving the planning board's residential applications to the ARB, then the guidelines would probably need to include some talk about massing, site placement, view preservation. There may be some guideline already for that, but I've seen write-ups and diagrams on how to do that. How to talk about landscape screening. The landscape plan may cover all the vegetation, all that, but in terms of just design review, the screening is the part that ARB would really need to talk about. Quality materials is another item that would be really great to have in some sort of guideline to make sure we don't see certain things that come up in front of the boards that, again, the local architects know not to do, but others come in and post things that aren't acceptable for urban. So item 5 is the ARB's technical expertise. So we would need to, proposing to require one board member as a liaison to the planning board who can participate in some of the planning board meetings. Definitely the pre-submission process would be probably the most important meeting to attend to up front to get some of these applications easier path through the process. And then going back to getting an architect on the ARB, it's critical. And one path to that is to find an architect in town that is not working in the village, to eliminate conflicts of interest. The ARB, the committee talks about the ARB being an advisory role on the planning board, to eliminate some of the visits to the planning board. That's something personally I'm not really for. What else we got here?
I think there's a lot of pushback also from various people, like the historic district people, the historic building people, that they don't want to have this quote unquote advisory role there.
Then they're asking at least to solve one problem by paying for an architect. Because you've seen how many times I've gone out asking what architects would like to serve, and the response is zilch.
So one solution,
I'm not attacking anybody here. I fully understand why you might not want to be on it. And I was, you would.
I've always said
But you want to make a living too, I bet.
that. Right, I can't give up my business.
Yeah. I got it.
so in any case, I mean, the problem is we are potentially our most valuable resources who understand the most and who know what the village is looking for can't serve. And we are balancing that based on a code of ethics that other villages do other things with. And one of the concepts is to have advisory, but some language that if that advice is not taken, then what happens? I will say, I don't know, who can answer this question, Cesar. Has the planning board ever overruled advice from the engineer or from the landscape architect and said, sorry, we don't like what you're doing, and just voted against it? I would think that that would be an unusual case that has happened, but they would, I think they go back and try to reach a compromise before they quote, just flat out overrule it. Is that a correct assumption?
I don't recall overruling, certainly not the engineer.
Although-
Even though I am an engineer, I respect our consultant engineer. Landscape architect, we utilize her extensively, and all her comments are attached to the engineer's comments.
But those are advisory comments, right?
They're advisory, but since I don't know anything about landscaping, it's 100% by whatever our landscape person recommends. It's a lot about roots, it's a lot about tree protection, and we're very serious about that.
So there's an example of advisory, but it's not disavowed. So I don't know if that's a balance that we can maybe make that agrees with our ethics or not. But once again, this is not one of those six. This would involve this
David,
committee.
in fact, since I am an engineer, I add things that our consultant does that perhaps he didn't think of.
There's definitely a point though, to having fewer meetings where you can actually get that feedback all at once. So I do, there's a strong argument.
Exactly.
To that point, the landscape architect participates in our pre-planning board meeting. So he has a chance to verbalize in addition to written comment.
So if we had an architect participating in that pre-planning committee, that might avoid having to bounce back and forth. One thought.
And that's a huge one of the problems, right?
Yeah.
Randy, because we had this discussion before, I think, when we were considering the ARC, and we sort of talked about, would you feel comfortable if it did in fact work the way the landscape architect and then Marianne is the lawyer, where the role is advisory, but obviously that architect is the expert in that area, and the planning board is sort of responsible for something else, some other part. Do you think that you could get comfortable that that could work? 'Cause I think we're trying to balance, right, this issue of conflict, and I think the idea is going to be to listen to the expert, right, which is in that case whoever is representing the ARB. Wondering if we can get sort of comfortable, and then also we've talked about this in the past, that if it wasn't working, right, if somehow the planning board was chucking, just like disregarding the advice, that then that would be revisited. I mean, I would hope that they wouldn't, because nobody wants to do a lot of work for no reason.
It's a logical argument. But now that I'm looking at it in context of the planning board's only going to have the biggest projects in Irvington, I believe that those big projects need full review by ARB. Separate, independent.
So not part of the planning process.
So obviously you see why we need further discussion on that particular issue and resolve on how that goes. I will also note that, I sort of hit the Pace University people over the head with, well, other villages don't have this ethical problem. What's the deal? And they were very clear that they agreed with Marianne, so to speak, that it is an issue, and we don't want to be open to whatever. And it was their suggestion that somehow we make it advisory, wherever it enters into the process. So the question is, where it goes into the process and, how that advice is taken. Obviously, once again, I don't think Mary Ann has ever been overruled in the planning board with anything that she has brought up. They've discussed it and, whatever. So the planning board has been respectful of these other opinions. Question is how we can do it. One of the issues too is if we're talking about these large projects, what happens is they change. And so, getting the ARB in front of them doesn't make sense because the site plan is going to change because of drainage or some other issue. But given that they will be multiple meetings, no, 3 million plus project is going to happen in one meeting. That gives the opportunity for a single advisory person to then go back to the ARB at a meeting and for them to discuss and resolve, and direct the single advisor. But once again, all to be discussed. I think we should move on from this.
I'm gonna just ask one question, because it's come up a couple of times. Where would the landscape, the engineer, I'm assuming, if a case just has, an application just has building department review, the building inspector is gonna go to the engineer. Same thing with the landscape architect, is that what you're expecting? That's the point at which the landscape architect?
No real
could be-
expectation. We're
Okay.
leaving that to be decided amongst those people.
Okay, you
with
had no recommendation.
what
Okay.
this process works. But yes, we still need a landscape architect to look at this stuff. Because the architect, ARB is not a landscape architect. And it doesn't necessarily have that expertise, but that has to be involved. Okay, moving on to item 6 is clarify and communicate professional consultant fees. So this is a fairly simple item. Basically, the survey is indicating people don't know what to expect. And we have a bunch of historical data that, which we haven't made a matrix of, but we could certainly make a matrix that projects of this type, air conditioning, backyard fences, whatever it is, of a certain type, generally have consultant fees that range from, A through Z.
And do we know that that data is accessible in the village systems? I don't know if Katie, you would be the right person.
It will take some work.
Because you get a village attorney's bill, you may not be able to break out, okay, there was this much for that piece and this much for that project. I don't know if they've set up that way.
Maybe the consultants should be able to do that. Right, like,
It's broken
No, it's
down by,
broken down.
we all break
By-
it down by,
yeah.
by,
We have access to.
Engineering and everybody, okay.
yeah, by application.
Yeah, but it's not computerized, which means I assume someone's gonna do it. Done. So, okay.
Okay, so we need to look at that data and then get a range of costs so that, if you're doing a $1 million project, you can expect that the range is, A to Z, and the median is, N, for the cost and for the number of visits to various meetings, and the total time to approval.
can I just clarify this point for you? And this is talking about like the village consultants, because not like the person's architect and all of that. I think the issue
Yes.
is that it's the consultants that the village uses that the homeowner has no control over. So I think having that information available,
This is specifically for
Specifically
Douglasville and.
because
the
that
landscape
is a
architects will-
surprise for a lot of homeowners.
And then it goes out, we are regularly asking people to, go and do engineering work for us. That can happen on larger projects. So once again, the simple point of this number 6 is that we gather this data. And then we present that so that when they come in as an applicant, and are discussing things with the building department, they can say, they won't be surprised that this is added to their $500,000 renovation or $1 million renovation, or whatever the case may be. Any questions on 6? Okay, then we move on to 7. Is create and clarify the pre-application support and process. Once again, this is not a, incredibly complex and doesn't involve lots of decision-making and figuring out, whether we're hiring an architect or not. It's setting up a informational meetings that someone can come to, offering the community maybe a quarterly or semi-annual meeting of, you just moved to town, you want to renovate. Here's a chance to come to a meeting and ask general questions before you get in. Have in those meetings the hangups that happen. Sorry, you bought a house in a historic district, and it's overbuilt on your lot. You're not going to get a swimming pool in your backyard. And a lot of people don't know that. They just bought their dream house, and the dream house included a swimming pool or a hot tub or whatever it is. So having a set of support set up is not rocket science. We can figure out what are the best things to do and include that. So,
David,
yes.
It does. I would think this has a big cost. It says that the informational report and meeting should be managed by a new land use facilitator. This thing is based on this land use facilitator handling the meeting, isn't it?
I don't think it was necessarily, but it's probably in
That's
there.
what's in here.
I know, I think because we did have like a lot of discussions over what kinds of meetings, what would be helpful. I think the idea is probably if we did that, then it would be facilitated by that person, but not necessarily. But the idea is really just more like homeowner education and ability to have, like a Q&A session.
This already exists too. I think it's already on the books. I think it's just not advertised. People don't actually.
That's different. That's the pre-submission meeting.
Oh, that's not the same.
Well, we have that one too. And, this
This
is
would be
sort of
like
clarifying
like
that
group,
as
like
well.
a group session, like you
Oh,
would
the
come.
group session,
Yeah.
right.
Arlene, it's all through this, column. A land use facilitator should lead the roundtables in the village.
I think that's assuming we would have that, but we don't have to.
But yeah, I think you could do that with our existing building.
Right.
Setting up
And we could
educating them.
ask for volunteers who want to do that. Maybe there's a citizen who wants to volunteer as that person who conducts that and becomes involved.
Marianne, you look worried about the level of knowledge of that volunteer
actually,
and the information that will be disseminated. Just made Marianne very nervous.
Or she'll get a lot of extra hours by having to sit in on every single session.
Which is the reason
It's
to,
gonna pay your retirement.
which is the reason to hire this person, and hiring this person would probably mean increasing our fees. And our fees currently are lower than our neighboring villages. And it would save the applicants tremendous amount of money, because in any building project, everything is about time. So every time they get bounced back to another month, their project costs more. That's a fact. I really feel sorry for this bakery guy over here. It's not open yet. And projects that do get bounced back like that, that it's costing them money. If we had, an individual who is actually making the process more efficient, it saves the applicant money, and it may even save our building money, maybe even save those 5-hour meetings that Cesar says to, and time and energy there. So that's a debatable issue of hiring that person, but there's two sides to it. And look at that. Okay, moving on, 8.
So the great clarified planning board pre-application process. Caesar can jump in anytime you want on this one. So you're talking about, I think the idea is to get more done at these pre-application meetings so that there's less, so that the first meeting is more of a working meeting rather than an introduction to code items and stuff that's missing out of the initial view of the application. I'm not, yeah, cool.
We just had one just now, it happened before, where the application is so poorly presented. You tell the applicant, don't come, you're wasting your money. Fix all these things before you even come. Avoid legal fees, the engineering fees at a formal meeting at the planning board. And in addition to that, when there's a disagreement on the technical issues, I always interrupt. Engineers are going back and forth, say, we're not settling this here, wasting time, settle it off limits, offline. And that's generally what we do, is to avoid, to explain to the applicant all the things that were wrong in this particular application, just this last meeting, would have taken at least a half hour. Now with a half hour of legal fees and engineering fees, who were sitting there trying to explain all the things that are missing. And Ed called him, building inspector called him, and had him in to say, you need to do all these things before you can even think of coming to the plan. So we do that on occasion.
So the idea here is that we're enhancing that process so that hopefully there's more of that, because the reverse happens in the sense that they come to this meeting and all of a sudden they're picked apart. Things that
Not pleasant for the messenger to tell them, and it's certainly not pleasant for them to hear me.
Well, particularly in public, it's a lot different if the message is, in a private meeting, than it is when you're on screen and the poor architect who has designed all of this is left with his jaw open and then going to tell his client that, oh, I have to redo all these drawings. That's, better that conversation happen outside in advance.
We try.
You do. Will agree with that.
So are you suggesting that when an application comes in, that there first be a meeting, a meeting just to go through the application and say what the people are missing? or whatever?
Depending on what the building,
But the
building
this is
department
probably
sees.
not such a bad idea, except that if somebody's ready to go, they lose a month. You know what I mean? It seems like you're talking about one more month there.
No,
or
not
this-
necessarily.
This meeting would be whenever the person puts the up, there's generally a deadline. I mean, not generally, there's always a deadline.
Right.
For when the applications have to be in. And that deadline, I believe, is about 10 days before the meeting.
2 weeks.
So again, this is an item that needs to be studied, because even at the last planning board, we saw it was the first applicant that came in, and he was, his jaw dropped from the stuff he was missing. So they're getting through somehow, I
Yes.
guess.
That happens.
So that's the problem that we're trying to look at ways to eliminate more of those.
Okay.
And to Mary Ann's point, one solution may be that first meeting, and when the planning board meeting happens, maybe we need a little more time in there, in that space, so that if in that initial meeting, there are 2 items identified as can't be done, that gives the time the architect to resubmit before the actual meeting. So that once the meeting occurs, he's got that corrected. And then he can save his time and not have to wait another month. Again, details, and as you can see, the weeds here are thick. So that's why a smaller group is going to be necessary to sort of look at all the parameters of this and how many times this happens, and does it happen on certain sizes of projects versus other projects, all of that. We don't want to be spinning wheels for things that we don't need to correct either. Yeah.
And Mary Ann, while what they're suggesting may not save a meeting for a month, it'll save, to Arlene's point, save the applicant paying for the legal fees, and the engineering fees at a meeting that could have been settled with the building inspector 2 weeks before.
I mean, no question, yeah, no question that it works for those, but my concern is the person who really is ready to go.
Yeah, I understand. Yes, you're right. They
You
wanna
don't want
go.
that, yeah, you don't want them to
And we-
lose.
we-
Do they opt
results.
out if they know they're ready?
We've told people,
Well,
to Mary Ann's point, we've told people, don't come, you got too much, this is what you gotta do. No, we wanna come because we wanna get going. Okay. I'm not in a position to tell somebody you can't come.
Correct.
I think, you know, to your point, Caesar, I do think like you're gonna have those people, but you'll be saving the other people who don't know what's, you know,
Right.
yeah.
It comes up every now and then that it's so poor, it's not worth it.
And particularly the architect involved. Frequently, I guess this is an outside architect. It's not so familiar with.
Well, it was a project that was first submitted 9 months ago. Came back this time and what was submitted the first time was not submitted this time. And didn't know, not sure if he was hiding all the illegal stuff that was there or dismissed the vote on what was there. He just said, look, you gotta go back and include everything that was in the first submittal.
And to that point, there are, you know, architects and owners that know that they have situations that are, you know, less than it should be. And their idea is, let's not talk about this and see if we can get it through.
Right.
And in many jurisdictions in New York State, hey, no problem. We are a little tougher than most other places. Which again is maybe a surprise to an architect who's not worked in these river towns or Scarsdale or places like that do look at these details. But they get embarrassed in front of their client, and that's not good either. And then they blame us. So hopefully this kind of thing will smooth that issue in terms of public perception. Okay, where are we here? Number 9. Go ahead, Randy. Okay. Oh, yes. I read my own writing. Hire a facilitator. This is the one we've already sort of discussed. And there are, the time frame here was written down as 8 months to look at this. We, you know, need to see a little bit what happens with the reorganization of other stuff first. And then we need to evaluate what role this position may have. Presumably, there's already an open spot for a part-time person, which the building department is desperately in need of. I'm not sure that this could overlap with that or not, but that's potentially something to look at. Adding work onto the building department, they are overstressed as it is with the work that they do. Although we probably need a little more matrix understanding of, you know, what exactly is their workload in different areas, how that's distributed. But the the Pace people were, you know, this is a customer service issue. And if you're having customer service problems, you know, Walmart, you have that greeter at the front door, who does nothing but say hello. And Walmart is a major organization that does not waste money on anything, particularly employees. But nonetheless, every single Walmart has one of these people there. So not that that's what this position is, but it's about customer service and pleasing people and facilitating the process. And maybe if it's looked at, that adding such a person will actually reduce the cost of all of the process because it goes more smoothly. And part of this 9 is to also create a onboarding process for all the board members, so that any new board member gets their information about ethics and the rules and whatever, and has what they need to know, background to work. And then also part of this also is reorganizing the organizational chart that we have now, but it's not the first thing you get when you open up the building site. Not that it should be the first thing, but it's not easy for people to grasp. So that's what item 9 is.
Can I say one quick thing about that?
Yes.
I do think that we need to sort of be a little further along in knowing what we're going to be revising and streamlining so that we have a good idea and understanding of what skill set that person is going to need.
Absolutely.
Stating the obvious.
And once again, this is not one of those first 6.
Yeah.
This is one of the other ones that we need to, but we can't just shove it aside. It would be nice if somebody actually started, looking at that issue. Item 10 is the updating of the flow chart and guidance documents and forms. So all of that needs to be looked at. It's once again, it's not a top of the list thing to do, and there's a lot of other things that once we do them, then all of this needs to be updated. And now that we have our new building department software, etc., hopefully that can be integrated into that to make things easier to reference and find out information from. And yeah, okay, so that's 10. Now we move into 11, revising the website. This is a big project, but our website for the building department, as looked at by other people, is a little difficult to navigate. So it could be done. Pace has given us a couple places to look at people who have done it, and smoothed out, made searching for, what type of project they're looking for and what the issues may be, so they can do that on their own. And they particularly note that Hyde Park's website is very user-friendly. So we felt that that was worth looking at, and etc.
I have a question for you. It has to do with timing. You identified 1, 2, 6, 7, 12, and 13. Look at up front. But yet you have throughout this 6-month time frame for things 8 and 11. I am not going to go back through it. What is the distinction? if everything's gotta get done in 6 months, what's the difference?
Well, there's a difference in focus and there's a difference in just timing.
But it's the same people working on it for the first 6 months.
In some of them, they are, yes. And maybe the result here is that those on the back burner, the ones not the 6, those timeframes are extended.
Okay, all right, I just want to understand how you sort of select 1, 2, 6, 7, 12, 13. I think it's more probably, in your view, the simplicity of capturing the, the concept, if you will.
Right. In the hope that maybe we don't need 6 months to do that. And I mean, the analyzation of, we're going to analyze this every year, 3 or 4
Right.
meetings, we can make a policy and do it. It's fine. So we are there on that. I will say that what's not listed in the revised current website is there is money available in this consolidated funding application, presumably to cover things like that we could apply for. And we've listed that under item 13 on the code update. So that those projects for, quote, revising website, that's a bunch of work. And I don't want to dump that on Charles. He's got a little better things to do than that. Unless we want to. Exactly. Expected. So therefore, it would be nice to, these people in Hyde Park, they hired somebody. Let's find out who they are. Let's see if we can get a grant to cover that. And if it is, then we can maybe get on track to doing something like that. Okay, that's 11, 12 and 13.
12 is revamp the board member onboarding process. At least from my point of view at the ARB, we don't have orientation, we don't have packets of all the information we need. I know it's all out there, so I did gather some of it for the last 2 people that came on to the ARB. I just think we need to formalize that. Mary Ann did the training at the beginning of this. That training document is probably a good introduction to the overall process.
Thank you, Mary Ann, for doing that at our very first meeting. That was extremely helpful. And lots of people learned a lot of things they didn't know. So, that's a missing item.
So this, again, this is, it's not a lot of work. It's just gathering all the information, formalizing. So I don't have a lot to say on that one. Is there any questions on that?
I would comment that that will make things more user-friendly for applicants when they come up and they are meeting board members and board members make comments, that the board members have a little more professionalism, maybe because they've studied this than they would if they didn't. And therefore, that would resound with the applicant, like, oh, these people do know what they're talking about, sort of thing.
And kind of going back to the current website, we have all the information there, but I get questions from members of where do I find eCode, where do I find our code, where do I find the applications? You have to go to the homepage, scroll down, in the header bar, there's a link, it's just not obvious. So that part of revising the website should be just a quick pass through by a consultant. So number 13, update the village code. This is, of course, a very large project. In addition to all the items, the strategies that would create code changes, necessary code changes to implement, we have in section 3 under local code updates, another bucket of 12 or 13 items that would need code updates also. So one thing that these the PACE consultants did say, well, like you just said, is that there is funding for this sort of code updates. And I believe they put a link into the document here that you can click on, see some of this.
I believe Scarsdale just updated their code Charles, I don't know whether you know who paid for that. Or whether they had any money.
They did,
You did,
yeah, the
okay.
village paid for that.
So I'm a strong proponent of finding the grant first and looking for the grant before we spend any money for anything. So if it's available, Ace says there is money out there under this CPI program. So let's look at that first. If that doesn't happen, then it's going to be go back to you, the people in charge of this.
So one thing I did want to say was that going through this process, we've generated an enormous amount of changes. Going back to like doing this annually, if you look at what's under the local code updates on section 3, that's what kind of results out of the yearly process of like, let's go back to the FAR min maxes and rework that, or talk about coverage issues and how we calculate it. Those are the type of they're not little, but those are the type of issues that come up in yearly updates, as opposed to this giant process that we're going through right now.
Okay, so the recommendation is that's an 18-month period for the code updates, and the first thing that committee would be assigned to do would be to look for funding. And then, so there's no decisions about anything, there's no updating, there's no anything, unless until we get an answer, do we have a grant or not? And once we have an answer for that, if it's positive, we do an RFP, we get the grant, we get that started, and move forward that way. If it's not, then that committee needs to come back to the board and say, no money, is going to cost in this range. We've talked to 2 consultants who do that. Maybe one was the Scarsdale person.
Can I ask a question?
yeah.
Do you remember like what the range was? Or did they use a consultant in Scarsdale?
My understanding was no. They utilized village council, do a lot of work, working with staff, particularly the planner, the engineer, and the building inspector to revise the code. One thing to point out, when they did revise the code, they elected to undertake a moratorium to prevent people trying to get in before, and try to, adopt things before they were changing the code. Because there's a sense out there that certain elements of the code might become stricter. They were trying to get around that. I mean, maybe I'm simplifying the concern, but ultimately that took place as well. That added time to the overall process. It's just something to consider. I would say that in Ardsley, I do know that they were able to procure a grant through CFA to do zoning. They worked with a consultant, zone expert to look at the code and make recommendations for what it would take to look at the zoning. He helped develop the application for grant, and he did actually twice. The first time that it was unsuccessful, then they made some changes, and it was successful the second time. So there is an avenue for doing that, but it did require using outside experts.
I will add on to this. Of course, we all know that New York State has established a new set of codes, the Green Code, I forget what it's called, that is, previously we adopted the stretch code. We and 4 other communities in New York State, nobody else did. So that's one of our problems, is that we adopted that, nobody else did. So an outside architect comes and says, what's this requirement? Well, now the state's solution to nobody else adopting it is they are enforcing that the entire state adopt this new quote unquote green code, which has some similarities to our stretch code, and we may not have a lot to change. That said, the consultancy business that's like opened up a window for anybody who does code consulting in the state to offer their services to all these communities that now have to look at their code and see that it works. And they may or not be taking an opportunity to look at other things in their code at the same time. So I'm thinking that there will be available people out there to look at that and consult with it. But once again, as Larry can testify, getting a grant writing up is a process that involves a bunch of stuff and et cetera. So that's why the timeline on this is 18 months. Okay, so the roundup here is that what we feel is, the community has been asking for this, beating us over the head. Every time I go out in the street and anybody is asking me what's going on with the streamlining committee, when are we going to correct all of this outrageous stuff that we do? I think what we are sitting realistically with, this board is the one that established the concept. As soon as you started after the last election, you realized that this and the bond were like the two main issues. And you took that on to yourself to create the Facilities Planning Committee, to create this committee, and then you've found us to work on it, and we've been working on it for 9 months, and the Facilities Planning Committee has been doing their work, and et cetera. So I think it's an opportune time to be able to take a few forward steps and say, as a board, we are moving forward, that we received these recommendations, we are moving forward on these items, and we're moving forward on the other items on different timeframes, and we are taking action, and we have done something. And that the legacy of this particular board will include that, as opposed to those naysayers in the community that say nothing ever gets done, and it always gets put off and never accomplished.
Spend a lot of time, if that's true, accomplishing nothing, and I'm pretty confident that we do accomplish a lot, just not always public. So let me suggest the following. You're focused on 1, 2, 6, 7, 12, and 13, which are annual evaluation process, limiting the scope of site development plan review, which is pretty complex discussion. Clarifying, communicating professional consultant, not so complex. It's just grunt work to collect the data. Create, clarify pre-application support process that's involving the right people so that they make intelligent decisions about it. Revamping board member onboarding process, which I think is not super complex. It's probably, distilling down what you did present to this group as we bring people on, and then updating the village code, which you've already observed requires a grant to begin with. So if you were asking me to give my opinion on whether or not we should do those things, I would be favorably inclined to do them. But the way this process works, and again, when you're sitting on this side, is tomorrow or the next day, I'm going to go sit with you, and we're going to talk about what's possible, who's doing what at what time, and can some of these things be clumped together? Because for one group to work in a vacuum while the other group is working on something that has implications for it doesn't make a lot of sense. So I will commit only, and I'm going to let everybody else say whatever they'd like after this. We'll commit only to meeting with you by the end of the week so that we can talk about, okay, how would we go about doing something like this? And you guys will be back on Monday for your reprise of this performance, which I appreciate. And, at that point, we'll hear if the public has something to add to it or questions about it or whatever.
And we would be happy to be part of that conversation that you're having with Charles too, if you want.
Yeah, understood. I mean, you've done a good job of laying it out and giving me options. In truth, I think perhaps the reason you haven't not to single any one particular item out, but you have lots of options, partly because there are lots of different opinions on every single issue. And that means that it requires the folks with the expertise to sit there and really talk about it. Now, since you're going to continue to be in the ARB and you're going to presumably be on the village board at a point in time. It's not in the distant future, which means that when those groups get together, you will be sitting in, either as a board member or when needed, somebody will consult with you about, hey, what do you think about this with regard to the ARB? So, my answer is yes, you will be involved one way or another. It's probably not worth wasting your time for us to talk about when will personnel be available and what exactly does this require to do this stuff. So that would be my suggestion for at least the next 48 hours. And then we'll talk again on Monday when we see you. Just anybody else want to add anything to that? They're welcome.
Yeah, I think it's important to say that we support this, right? And I think it's an issue of phasing the timing and getting it sort of underway. But I think, obviously also have participated in the process a lot. I'm very familiar with it. So I do think it's a matter of how do we phase it, how do we figure out staffing it and timing. But I do think, I want to say that I'm very in favor of moving forward with it, right? That's, we just have to figure out the details, but I think, I think it was a good process.
For transparency's sake, Arlene and John were the ones who met with Randy and I in separate meetings between all of the other stuff that was going on to inform the board that this is where we were at the process. So both of these guys were very involved in. Thank you so much for all of your contributions.
Appreciate it. Good. I didn't mean to leave you out because you're going to get dragged in anyway. So
Discussion on the process of where to go, and that's very worthwhile to look into that. And Arlene, I give you credit, you mentioned the code, root cause, but unless I missed it, there was in addition to looking at which board goes where and who comments where process, I think the code raising the threshold so that you don't have to go to any boards. You just have to go get a building permit or a construction permit. And I think that would be a major improvement of, you don't have to go to a board, you don't have to pay for the fees, and you don't have to go through 2 months, probably maybe 2 meetings. And there are certain, coverage is a big thing, and there are things that are counted as coverage that I'm sure that Maren could tell you which ones it is. There isn't any reason in my mind why a retaining wall that you need to keep the hill from falling down becomes part of coverage.
Here, here.
That's a really hard one too, because I think just an anecdote, like in my own house, I don't know what Jorge's building in my thing that with rocks, because he's like, I can't do it. I can't go to the planning board because, to do a retaining wall or to change the retaining wall. So I think that was probably the starting point, right, in the streamlining committee where we talked about the threshold.
Yeah.
That our threshold is,
I think that's changing the process around, whatever shakes out. But keeping more projects out of the process, I think would be more effective in the end of streamlining.
And that's where we are different, right? That's where we are different, because I think Irvington has, everything goes to the planning board. Where people feel like everything goes, which is where we are different from other municipalities.
There was a couple of months ago, there was a Station Road, somebody was putting in a new air conditioner, and it needed a 4-foot by 2-foot concrete pad to put it on. And that was before the planning board.
Right.
It was like a joke.
I was there at that meeting. Painful to see these guys sitting there waiting for the next applicant and the next person and this discussion about that. And they're paying their architect to sit there.
More recently, somebody was putting in, because they finished their basement, they needed a secondary egress.
Right.
And they had to put a window well in. And it was coverage, and it pushed before the planning board for a 4 foot, 3 foot by 2 foot window well.
They went to the ARB afterwards and I asked them, why are you here?
I mean, if we could do something about that, I mean, those are the things that people complain about
Those are
constantly, and
both
things that
things.
I'm concerned about as a homeowner, and like, they do seem like kind of straightforward. It's really, it says something that you both feel that way. I mean, I think you feel that way. I feel like if we can identify some of those things earlier on. in the
Another
process, it'd
sticky
be great.
issue is impervious surfaces.
And certainly we had questions on it, and as I said, I don't care what the questions are, this is approved. This shouldn't be here.
And the flip side of that is that if you're gonna funnel more to the building department, then.
Well, they look at it anyway, so.
No, understood, but that's item 9, if they need staffing there will be more volume to the building department, because if you're not looking at it and they're not looking at it.
Well, look at it this way, Mayor, we don't look at it until the building department looks at it.
Yeah, they look at it first and they're doing that, and
Yeah.
it would actually make their work faster if they didn't have to circle this damn window and say it doesn't meet your coverage.
Okay, yeah.
If they had a clear set of guidelines for when
Okay.
they can, allow whatever.
It's really the public process that you're missing out on with the planning board. The building department's still doing their thing.
Yeah,
So
got it.
in fact, they probably have to work harder to get it ready for the planning board, you know what I'm saying?
Oh,
So,
all right.
but you have to be willing to not have the public process and decide where that's okay and where it isn't. Okay.
There's gotta be projects that it's obvious, like, nobody's gonna see this, like, why would they, like, possibly have complaints, and there's gonna be other
That's
ones
what
that
I'm
they do, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but that's the downside of, saying you're taking lots of things away from the planning board means you're also
Right.
taking it away from the public. So you just have to all decide where's that line. And then, that's gonna be the subcommittee.
And you'd be surprised.
Right.
You'd be surprised, like, oh, this project will be one meeting, and then 20 people come out.
Yeah.
Okay, any, Mitch, Josie, Ken, we're good with this?
Well, they get another shot Monday night, but,
Okay, so we're on.
as does the public.
I
yeah.
really appreciate all this work, this is an
Shorter on
improvement.
Monday night.
Yes, I said that at the beginning.
No, I'm reiterating. I'm reiterating.
Trust me, we want to make it as short as possible. But yet we want to see what the public has to say about it or not.
They can watch the video.
I'm fairly convinced that there's two sides, and part of our problem is the neighbor side,
Yes, absolutely.
and the other part is the homeowner side. I think actually both of those groups would appreciate relooking at the building code. So that they don't have to waste their time. I mean, for neighbors to come in and complain, they have to sit through those meetings too.
Yeah.
And then they start hiring their own professionals to come in and comment on it. If the code is more clear, then that would eliminate a lot of that, again, for both sides of the issue. So I don't see a lot of objection for us going forward.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody. And I guess I'm gonna make a motion to executive session regarding personnel matters. All in favor?
Aye.
Stay here, right, Charles?
Preemptively second.
Yes, yes, yes.
I know where you're,
I'll
I
take
know where you're
yeah,
going. I
I'll
know
take
where
your
you're
proxy.
going. Thank you.
I don't think
No,
so.
I don't think so.